What's up, YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Finance and Freedom. Today, we're talking about MSTY and whether I think it's a good buy or not. I know there's a lot of diehard MSTY fans out there, and so I actually think this video might be a little frustrating to some of you. Hopefully, it doesn't frustrate you too much. Let me know down in the comments if you like or dislike this video. I realize it's a bit premature. Anyway, before we do that, here's a little disclaimer. All right, now that that's out of the way, I actually fully intended on coming on today and talking about how much I endorse MSTY. I've actually made a decent amount of money with MSTY. I have a lot of it myself. But the more I started digging into the details and the trajectory of the stock, I just can't endorse it. I will say right now, it's pretty cheap. And that's nice because I do think that there is going to be an uptick by the end of the year. Both Bitcoin and MSTR, I think, are going to surge by the end of the year. I know Bitcoin is kind of squashed right now, and so I do think by the end of the year things are going to go well. I just think for the long term, it's not a good hold. If you buy right now and get rid of it, maybe the end of the year, I think you'd make a good chunk of change. But like I said, for the long term, there are better options. For example, Ulti has figured out the whole NAV erosion situation, and I think is a much better buy. It's also diversified over quite a few companies, and so the stability of diversification is there as well. So let's dig into why I believe that MSTY is maybe not the best choice. Another thing real quick before we dive into this, I'm not saying that you can't make money with MSTY. I've made money and I have no doubt that you could continue to make money. I just think that there are better options than MSTY, and I'm going to go over the reasons why. All right, let's take a look at some of the reasons why I don't think this is a good long-term hold, or at least not for right now. In fact, I don't mind if any of these ETFs go down as long as the underlying asset is also going down. So for example, when Ulti is going down last month, well, the whole stock market was cooling off, especially the technology department, which Ulti is heavily allocated toward, and so that makes sense. Well, if you take a look at this chart here, you can see I've got BTC and MSTY pulled up. And it's BTC grayscale. For BTC, grayscale correlates very closely with Bitcoin, and so this is a good analogy or a good comparison. So if you look at the two right here, you can see there's a big divergence between the two charts. So it just keeps on getting wider and wider, the spread here. And so while you've got BTC going up in value, you've got MSTY going down in value. The reason this is a problem is it's NAV erosion. I know everyone it's almost like I don't know, a taboo word to say, but that is the case. And if they continue on this trajectory, they're going to have a reverse stock split, which they did already have with TSLY or Tesla for Tesla. And I know that YieldMax is fighting hard to make sure they don't have any more reverse splits because a lot of people weren't very happy when that happened. And so I don't know if they're going to do a strategy change, kind of like they did with Ulti, to even things out. But until that happens, I could see MSTY just continuing to dive. Now, like I said, with the dividend payout, you'll probably still come out ahead, but it's not going to be as good as some other options, like I said, like Ulti, which actually follows the flow of the stock market, which I think is a better buy. Let's move on to the next chart. Taking a look at MicroStrategy itself, not MSTY, you can see over the course of the last 6 months, we're up 30.92%. Great, awesome. But if you look over on the next tab, you've got MSTY, which over the course of the last 6 months is down 22.92%. That's like a 50% spread. That's huge. Now, like I said, I know that the dividends make up for a good portion of that, but it's still just continuing to decline. Like, I would rather see this closer to zero than a negative 22.92%. Like I said, there's a complete decoupling from the underlying asset, and I just don't think that's going to be a recipe for success in the future. So I'd like to reiterate the fact that right now I do think that MSTY is cheap, and if you buy it now, sell it by the end of the year or whenever Bitcoin does a big uptick, like I think it's going to here in the next few months. Speculative, I know, but historically speaking, I think that the last couple months will be really good and positive for Bitcoin, MSTY, and MSTR. So those are my thoughts. I really don't think it's a good, set it and forget it long-term hold. Like I said, there's better options out there. Sorry for all you Misty fanboys out there. Like I said, I think there's going to be better options. And if Misty can get their stuff together and figure out a better strategy to make sure that they don't continue to decline in value, I think it could be potentially a really good option in the future, just not right now. Anyway, that's all for today. Thanks for joining me. Feel free to drop a like, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.